You're listening to Interzone. I'm your host, Dave, and I'm joined with my co-host,
Adam. Oh, hello. And hello, listeners. You are listening to Interzone, a podcast. And on this episode, we have a very special guest who we're going to be speaking with, Joe Casey from the band Protomartyr.
Yeah, really stoked to speak with Joe. Protomartyr is currently doing a mini tour and celebrating the 10th anniversary of their 2015 release, The Agent Intellect. And we talked a lot about this with Joe.
Yeah, mainly I think we did. We also talked a lot about Kinkos. That was something that came up. We talked about the ascendancy of the far right and a number of other laughable topics. Certainly it was a very substantial interview, and we do want to give our sincere thanks to Joe Casey for lending us his time. You can, of course, check out Protomartyr through various online resources and pick up any one of their Fantastic Six records, but definitely The Agent Intellect was the one we focused on, as it is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And with that said, how about we just dive right into that interview, David?
Let's do it. When you were going in to make this album, I was reading a bit about it before this, and I read that you said that the band just wanted to do something different. What was it like during that time, and how would you compare, like, just before you started coming up with these songs to your previous album?
Well, I mean, this was so long ago that it's all a little bit hazy. But I would say in those days, it was, like our first album, we kind of basically recorded every song that we knew, that we had come up with in the previous 2 years of existence. And then we decided after that first one that let's go into the studio, let's try to write right away, and let's keep at this. This is really, the iron was really kind of hitting after the second record. And then, so before the Agent Intellect, the two major differences were we had done a tour of America and we had been over to Europe after the second record. So that was kind of exciting new stuff for us. So we were taking it a lot more seriously than maybe we had to. The previous one, we also didn't want to get stuck in a hole necessarily being locked into a specific sound. Now that's easier said than done when you're a band that doesn't have much talent, or you're like learning your talent. It's, you can't, say, oh, we're going to sound completely different and then it's going to work. So I think just from the songwriting side of the thing, which is the band coming up with the music, they weren't trying to repeat themselves. They were a little bit more worried about it than I was. They were worried about being pigeonholed as like a punk band, or just being compared to this was a time when people were discovering us, like you said, so they'd be like, oh, this band is post-punk, and they remind me of The Fall or Joy Division or something, and that would be, which is good bands. I'd rather be compared to good bands than bad bands, but for especially for the musicians in the band, it was kind of like, I want to try to write songs that I can't be compared to anything else. Whereas me, I'm fine with it. I don't care. But it was good that, but then later on for me, it was like, oh, I should try to sing or write lyrics different than I had before. So I think every band does that, where they don't want to just be stuck with their old ways. But because of touring and because of people being into our previous record, kind of luckily, we did feel like, oh, if we, on the third record, on Agent Intellect, people are going to hear this. Whereas the first two, I don't think we ever really considered that people would even hear them. Definitely the first one. And the second one was kind of fluky that people heard it. So this one, Agent Intellect, we knew going in, like, oh, like this is going to be reviewed, and we're going to tour on it, and there's actually people in other states and other countries that are interested in us. So that's probably the first that we considered an audience.
And I'm kind of curious, because you did have that tour that you mentioned. You were traveling throughout Europe. You had that sense that maybe something was happening with the group. Did those experiences traveling around the world impact at all the songwriting, whether from the band or your own lyrical writing for the songs that would end up on the Agent Intellect?
Not specifically, because I definitely was still of the mindset that one of the things that people liked about us was that we were at least the lyrics were pretty specific to Detroit and where we were from. We still all had day jobs, so it seemed like writing about what we knew was better than, I'm going to start writing about traveling the world, because it was still new and exciting and almost impossible. I think just the traveling around again was just like, because we play these places that we've never been to before, and people would show up and pay money to see us. it was, if it inspired the writing of the music in any way, it was like, oh, people actually like us, which is a good thing in small doses for your confidence as a band when you're writing stuff. Like, oh, someone's going to hear this. And also back then, I would say on that tour in America and in Europe, we had already started like testing or playing songs live that were going to end up being on this record. And so that really benefited because you could tell which songs were going to, oh, this part of the song is really good. This part, you could actually see the audience or feel the audience getting bored with certain songs or really liking the new songs. So, there's some songs like Coward Starve, the Agent Intellect, we had been playing live for quite a while before. The touring in itself, just having practice playing these songs, benefited the record, I think.
And what was the earliest song that you think was created that ended up on Agent Intellect?
No definitive answer on this from me because I don't remember, but I know like Coward Starve was written very early. And I feel like The Devil in His Youth was pretty early, and Why Does It Shake probably was pretty early. I'm going to say those three I definitely remember playing live on tour before they were recorded. And then something like Ellen really came together in the studio as much as it could, because what we did back then, because Agent Intellect was recorded over a weekend basically, and which was a lot of time for us because the first record was recorded in one day. And so we had the luxury of like 3 whole days. And so back then what we'd do is we'd go to our friend Derek's basement and like record demos, quote unquote, kind of going through songs. And so that and playing some of the songs on the tour definitely helped us. So when we got into the studio, we could lay down things very fast and then have like the final day to experiment with, like Ellen was kind of an experiment as far as like studio recording and all that kind of stuff. So
and something that's always interesting is I feel like when you make a record, you're always working with different producers, or whether it's you guys doing most of it, or you're always just doing something a little different. And for this one, you worked with Bill Skibby. How did that kind of come about? What led to working with him?
Well, he had done he's the only fellow that we've gone to twice. And that's because with our second record was the first one we recorded at Key Club. And the reason why we went with Bill is because pretty much a lot of bands from Detroit that we admired had gone and recorded at Key Club, which is, out in Benton, or was in Benton Harbor. I don't even know if it's there anymore. Benton Harbor, Michigan was on the other side of the state. Like bands like Tyvek had recorded with them, and other bands. And so we liked the idea of going someplace and recording. We basically stayed there and got up in the morning and then recorded. So we liked that idea of going someplace. And so the second, he did a good job on Undercolor Official Rights. So we're like, oh, let's go back to him again. And this time it was different because he was busy moving major portions of the studio. He was packing up into a semi truck to drive all the way to California to set up like a home studio in a mansion to record a Kills record.
Okay.
He was really busy doing that. Yeah, he did a good job. I'm not going to shit on him for being busy with a well-paying job where he was also recording our record. But I could tell, and we could all tell that, oh yeah, his mind is on something else. Like he's busy doing this major project, and in between he's recording our songs. And so that was the thing where we liked Bill a lot. We liked what he came up with us, but then it was kind of where we got the idea of like, next time let's try to do somebody different and see what he does or what they do with the sound. And I think that was just because we realized that we didn't, like we said before, like we didn't want to change too drastically between albums, but we did want to change slightly. And working with a different producer always kind of gives you slightly different results. Mm-hmm. And so we knew next time, and then it was the middle of winter when we recorded, and we're like, next time let's go someplace warm for the record. So that was decided. But yeah, because I remember it was snowing a lot, and we were in Benton Harbor, and we never left the compound. We never left the studio. And it's like we could be anywhere in the world. Like we don't necessarily have to. We're in the studio all the time, so let's go someplace warm so if we step outside. And so then the next one was recorded in Los Angeles. But yeah, that's what I remember. It was cold. It was exciting. Like he was, packing up his studio. That was kind of like interesting to see like what he was going to take with him to drive all the way to California for. It was kind of funny because it was before we were signed to Domino, and we were like, wow, the Kills, are out on Domino. We're like, hey, they sure have a lot of money to make this record. And then Domino's never given us that amount of money to have a guy drive a studio across the country to record in a mansion. But it was kind of funny to think about that. We were like, wow, that Domino sure is a fancy label. We signed to them and found out the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this and your previous record, Under Color of Official Right, those were both for Hardly Art, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and with that, we are celebrating this year the 10th anniversary of this record, of The Agent Intellect. I have a couple questions about particular songs on the record I'd like to get into, but just before we dive into that too much, on a whole, I am curious, and Dave has a question about the album artwork. I have a question about the album title itself. I think Hardly Art released a little blurb explaining it a bit, but I'm wondering in your own words if you can talk about that title for the record, The Agent Intellect, and what that means.
Well, I had gotten the book called, I believe it's been a long time. I think it was The History of Melancholy, and it was a book from like the 16th, either 1600s or the 1500s. It was a pretty old book, and it had a lot about philosophy and literature from that period and ancient history, all about, like, it was kind of a treatise or a compendium of the arts and philosophy and science dealing with sadness, which I thought was a pretty interesting, it was a hard read. It was a big brick of a book, but it had a lot of different information. So you would read a chapter, and it'd take you a while to read a chapter, but you'd read a lot about Milton or different philosophers that were popular back in the 1600s, and it was like really kind of heady, and you were getting a lot of information by reading like a small chapter about something, and like he'd be like, oh, and then this philosopher said this about sadness, and then Shakespeare, as we know, said this about, so you're getting all this information. And one of the things was about the agent intellect, and so I kind of read up about it, and it's like it's one of those philosophical concepts that people don't really know it. I forget who, Socrates. One of those guys was talking about. I believe it was Socrates. But then I somehow know two different philosophy professors that I went to school with when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And it's sad that I know one. The fact that I know two. And so I'd ask them, like, hey, what is this, the agent intellect? That sounds pretty interesting. What does it mean? They're like, we don't really know. It's not like people have theories about it, or like, But I just thought that was a very interesting concept, at least my limited understanding of it. And I thought it would be a pretty good album title. And then it kind of was worming, as I was writing the lyrics for the songs, like these concepts that I was getting from that book, The History of Melancholy, were kind of worming its way into like the lyrics. And I like that when the stuff that I'm consuming or thinking about at the time of an album bleeds into the writing process, and so that's kind of how that happened. And it kind of, because it's an unknowable concept, or it's a thing that people have ideas about what he was talking about, then it becomes like it kind of fits the unknowable concepts that I was trying to bat around with the record. So
yeah, it's kind of like trying to rope in these concepts that are a little bit more opaque or harder to articulate too much. And
yes.
And, to a degree, I think I'm familiar with the work. If it's A History of Melancholy, I have a copy myself that I have yet to attempt to tackle at home. But,
yes.
I'm curious about something because, I think superficially a lot of people would hear music from the band and they might associate it with anger or frustration, not necessarily sadness. Is sadness something that you contend with a lot in your writing of lyrics for the band?
Right. Yeah, I was trying to think about this because I've said this in interviews before, but like recently, and I guess it was now 2 years ago now, but we had gone on tour with the band Idols and played these big arenas and stuff, and they were nice enough to ask us to play. Years ago, they we played England and they opened up for us, and I remember at the time thinking like, oh, what a nice bunch of lads, but they're never going to make it. They're never going to be as big as us. And then they got huge, and they were nice enough to be like, hey, we were kind of influenced by Protomart early on. They've never, but I was going to go on this tour, and I'm like, well, I need to figure out why these guys are bigger than us. Like what do they have that we don't have? And the first night we go up there and I do my songs about sadness and how, life's a misery sometimes. And, basically you suck songs, life sucks and you suck. And then Idols come out and all their songs are like, you can do it. And, you're the greatest. And, you're smart enough. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I see why they got bigger than us, But for me, yeah, I guess I like trying to sing about or write about stuff that are relatable things that are hard to convey, and then that way you can get into poesy and abstract thoughts and notions about things, because they are so hard to nail down, and that is like sadness and failure and guilt, and it's a lot of like heavy stuff. It does. I find that it's the thing that kind of animates what I like to think about or sing about, at least, and it helps for the most part that the band is kind of writing kind of moody things, or the music is very dramatic, and then you have to think about what kind of words can fit this kind of dramatic music and not be too top heavy or not be too on the nose or something. So talking about sadness or life in a weird way, I think makes the music more palatable or less,
I think there's something in abstracting an idea. It makes it, oddly enough, a little bit more relatable. As you say, it's not so on the nose, so there's almost an entry point for people for that.
Right.
And I really appreciate that with your group and with a number of some of my four favorite bands, I should say. And I also really do want to commend I think the approach that you take for a lot of lyrical content as well, because you do broach a lot of uncomfortable subject matters that I think over time have proven to be very, how can you say, prescient, such as, we'll talk about particular songs in a minute regarding that, but even aside from the subject matter, I think there's also the packaging, there's the presentation of the band with the artwork, and you include zines with your albums, and you curate your own album artwork. And Dave actually was questioning something about this particular album cover for the Agent Intellect.
Yeah, so I always love the art because there's all these little things in there that you don't always see at first. But I remember the first time I saw it, like I was like, "What is this? What is this record?" I'm like, "Oh, is that the Spirit of Detroit?" I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not. It's Constantine." But
right.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the cover and like I know you do a lot of like DIY influence collage aesthetic with the art. But like, what is it about those things that kind of draws you?
And maybe in particular for this album, that image of Constantine as what he may represent, or even just as the image itself, what made that so appealing to be, this has to be on the album cover?
Right. Well, it's funny, like the Spirit of Detroit thing. It's exactly right that I had gotten the face of Constantine, and I got a very sad story at the end of all this, talking about the artwork. But I loved going into like a copy store, specifically it was at the FedEx Kinko's. Go in there and make copies, and and see how the machine distorted the image, or like you could do like just a solid color, and I did solid green, and then I looked at it and thought, holy shit, that looks kind of like the Spirit of Detroit. It was a dumb accident. I wasn't planning on doing it, but I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. This was the first record I can say, because the first two were taken from flyers that I had made, and then only afterwards was I like, that would be a good cover of a record. This is the first one where I was like, okay, I need to come out with a cover image. And I had always kind of liked, like Greek and Roman statues and that. I knew I wanted like a solid face image, and I knew that the dog from the previous record had like the red on its face, and that was sort of accidental. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about that, and I was like, well, what can it be that, where it's not accidental this time, because I'm planning on it ahead of time. And it was like, oh, I'm just going to, the idea of like thoughts coming from the head. There's a lot of songs about the head in this album, so I have the red lines going on the face. It's all, it's never too planned out, but the discovery of, and I'm very bummed that now, though, especially like on Twitter or something, if somebody's image is of a Roman statue or something, they probably have the worst opinions you've ever you ever thought about, So people are really the real traditionalists are latching on to Roman statuary. But I just thought it was kind of a neat image.
Mm-hmm.
But the discovery of it is always the fun, like going to the copy place and messing with the image, and cutting stuff out, and seeing if it would work or not. Like that process I enjoyed quite a bit. But just recently I went in to like start making a flyer for something and start working on some things. And every single FedEx Kinko have gotten rid of their copiers and replaced them with much shittier copiers that are just black. Like they don't have any of the function that these copiers had that were kind of artistic. They got rid of all the artistic aspects of it. So it's like someone had come and taken all my paints or all my clay that I used and just destroyed it. So I don't know what I've looked online, like how much does one of those old copiers cost, and they're way too much money. So I got to think, it's my process is going to change. But as far as the image goes, I just knew I wanted a very stark face. The face of Constantine really stuck out to me, and it ended up being green out of dumb luck of like making copies and messing with the color.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Now, I appreciate that serendipity of even the use of colors, and then that shifting for this one being actually more planned out with forethought. As you said, very evocative, because the album deals with so many ideas of the head and the intellect.
Yeah, it just never comes out. Like I never like I can plan and say I want a head, and then this way, then I. And another thing that I used to do more, it's become harder like as we've gone on, because like you don't want to use copyrighted images or something, you don't want to get sued, but I would just go to John King Bookstore in downtown Detroit, which is a big bookstore full of used books, and I'd get they'd have like old magazines, and I'd just grab these magazines and buy them, and then going through those magazines, I'd be like, okay, now I need to find images that like jump out at me, and these are the images I'm going to use for this album or this poster or whatever. And I like that sort of limited, like I'm only drawing on what I was able to pull from my trip to the used bookstore, or what I have lying around the house. Now, luckily, back in the day, I used to have tons of shit lying around the house, old magazines and things, so I had more to draw on. But I like that limited factor of only being able to use what I have on hand, like not printing something off a computer necessarily, or, and then the limited aspect of, okay, I have to put it all together and tape it down and take it, like Kinko's, Xerox it, and that's going to be the image, what I can make from the copier.
Wow.
So that's always been part of the art, is and then not knowing exactly what I want until it kind of comes together, and thinking about the music as I'm doing it, but like not trying to be so exact, kind of letting the process reveal what the artwork's going to look like.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. This reminds me of something I once heard quoted from Brian Eno about how he talked about the limitations of technology sometimes making it a tool for artists. So I think he talked about distortion when videotapes are, worn out, or even like amplifier distortion when a guitar overload is played. And those became eventually tenets of video art and tenets of rock and roll.
Right.
It's kind of sad to think about this technology in its own way being taken out of these places and people not being able to play with that anymore and not have those sort of serendipitous moments of creation like you were talking about.
Right. Like the thing that bums me out the most, like with, the printer apocalypse that happened at Kinko's, is I will make like a Xerox thing, a flyer or something, and I figure like it, but then I will see online people like making a flyer or something, and I can tell it's completely done on a computer, and they've added some sort of computer effects to make it look like it's been photocopied. And for me, it's very obvious that it's a fake, that it's not been actually photocopied, and it's just some sort of computer effect. But I realized the old people that maybe used to use tintype or like older modes of creation, that nobody else cares about this. Like, they see the image and they read it like, oh, that looks like it's been photocopied, or they may even know that that's what they're trying to go for, and they say, oh, I recognize that, the way that image looks. And, that's maybe just the way that time works, and, what is old will pass away. But it is frustrating when you're like, oh, that looks fake to me, or that does not have the realness or the grits or the mistake in it that doing it the old-fashioned way is. Which I think it's hilarious that I'm talking about a copier at FedEx is the old-fashioned way, but that's the way it was.
Well, it's also kind of ironic that people want this authentic vintage look when they can just photocopy. But no, we'll just add a effect to it.
Right. Yeah. But it is easier. Like, I don't want to crap on people for taking and you'll see that also if I know people that are want their videos to have an old VHS effect to it, and you could find an old VHS camera and then record on it and then send it through, but eventually it's going to go through the computer,
At one point, it has to.
At one point, so, and that's the same thing that happens with music, oh, we really got to get all this vintage gear. Well, then you're recording it onto a computer and it's becoming zeros and ones. And,
there's an odd point of reduction that happens there with that. Yeah.
But I do think there are still some people that want to try and do it that way. It's just becoming less nowadays. We have a friend that's a graphic designer, and he really loves Raymond Pettibon, and he loves to just he doesn't want to get a tablet. He draws everything by hand, and then he'll scan it. But he doesn't want the digital lines. He just wants the imperfect drawn lines. And I'm like, well, it's harder that way. He's like, I don't care.
Well, I'm the same way. But then our drummer Alex, who is a great drawer, and he does all our T-shirt designs. We were recording stuff, and at the studio he had a tablet, and it's the first time I've seen him draw on a tablet, and he's well, this is amazing, and he was showing me how great it was to write on a tablet, and I was like, oh, I could tell it wasn't. I could see myself never getting a tablet, one, because they're kind of expensive, and two, it's I'm maybe too old to learn it. But I was thinking, I really, my kid will definitely learn how to use a tablet, because this looks pretty exciting. But it's not,
so we got a little sidetrack about the process of making stuff, which is fine.
We went on a Kinko's tangent, but that's okay. That's a good tangent to go on.
We love talking about this stuff. We want to talk about some of the songs. The first song on the record, "The Devil in His Youth," is really it really hits you. It's really striking,
right?
And really effective. And I think it's it sucks you into this kind of world and the thoughts that go through a lot of the songs that make you think a lot.
It's taken on some new meaning, I guess, recently. I don't know if I should say taken on new meaning, but it's definitely been thought of, and I've heard discourse around it, around the ascendancy of the alt-right. And I'm kind of wondering how purposeful was that? Was there this intent behind it to kind of highlight this sort of demigorg of a alt-right figure when this song was originally written and conceived?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they just appeared after the Trump election. It had been around. This kind of guy has been around, and it's a lot of in different forms. The kind of and I was definitely picturing kind of a upper class, kind of a rich white guy. Mm-hmm. That felt that the world, his whole life has been designed to hand him the keys to the kingdom, and he has the keys of the kingdom, but he's feels that he has to control everything, and and anything and it just seemed like that was in the air around the time that the record was written, which is 2014. Mm-hmm. That kind of guy seems very prevalent, online especially, but that sort of it's more rampant today. It's definitely more mainstream today, where it's just the idea of the very simple thing of the other is the problem. The reason I am not successful is this other is taking it from me, and I used to be. Let's go back. Let's reactionary kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just and I just wanted to make sure. And even like it's one of the worst things that happens when you get older is, and you're like into punk music or something. The amount of people that used to be into punk, and then they grow up and they get old and they become the most reactionary, worst people on earth, just because they, I don't know what it is, but like, so in the music scene, you'd see those kind of guys, like, what's happened to my scene? There's too many people of color, or there's too many women, or whatever. That
Yeah.
It's a very common thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really strange too, because it's like, were you actually listening to the words of these songs? Because clearly, they were not for this, right? So.
Right, and I think it's one of those things where you listen to this music when you're young, and at least is my theory of like why people could get the message wrong, is that you're like, I'm different and I'm special and this music is for me, and you already kind of have a me against the world kind of attitude, and your targets just change as you get older and you have a mortgage or something. Part of me sort of understands why people become bitter as they get older, because life has a way of really grinding you down, and it's the people's response to it, where, at least from my opinion, is you should probably go after the systems that create this bitterness and this soul-crushing feeling, as opposed to people that are also in the same system but below you, or next to you. So.
And I think there's something to that. I've often noted myself when I see people who've been part of these alt music or punk rock scenes, and they start harboring these very corrosive, horrid right-wing views. I don't think it's suddenly they've lost, the plot and they suddenly betrayed all their ethos. I don't know if they ever had those ethos. I do think a lot of people are disaffected out there. A lot of people feel alienated, and they will cleave desperately to whatever makes them feel special or unalienated. And unfortunately, the easy route to go about that is some very toxic ideology.
Yeah, like I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling alienated. I think it's a very common thing nowadays, But your response to it, unfortunately, can go. It can break one way or the other. It can go very badly. And it's like the punk rock thing. It's like, some people were into punk rock because it was it got a reaction out of people, or it was not the correct way to live. And so when they get older and they hear like, well, you shouldn't be racist, they kind of think, well, I'm going to be more racist because you're telling me not to do it. Like they have kind of like a weird sort of parental idea of it, or I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And I do think that a lot of that just stem from that need to be a provocateur. And, being a provocateur is great if you're dismantling oppressive systems. It's not so great if you're just doing it because you want attention. But
yes. And attention is one of the biggest, the biggest drives for a lot of people's actions, or to be the center of their own story, or have the feeling that they are in command of their life in total. And, that's a good and a weird. It's again. There's two ways that we can go about doing that. And a lot of people take the wrong way on that one.
Yeah. Something I was wondering, because we're talking a lot about the lyrics of the album and a lot of the themes, but I know you've talked about it before in interviews, but like musically, is it always like, how does that work? Like, because do you do the music first and then the lyrics after, or do you have like some kind of an idea?
Well, the music always comes first, and that's the great thing about it, is that the music has to come first. But I am thinking and contemplating things, and especially when we're getting ready to write new music, I kind of take stock of like, okay, what have I been thinking about? What have I been reading? What I've been watching? Like, what has been, and I will jot down. I used to have like notebooks of these things, and now it's just all on my phone in the notes app. But like, I'll write down things. But like, the music will tell me like what it can hold, and what And sometimes I'll try to jam an idea into a song and it doesn't work, or the vibe I'm trying to go for doesn't fit the vibe of the song, or the feeling of the song. But like, I knew like "Devil in His Youth" might have been. I don't know if that was necessarily a title I had in advance. I know like "In His Youth," that portion, the second part of the title, I had kind of floating around as like a phrase or something, and so I don't know exactly how they go. Things lock in until I've heard the music, and then sometimes there'll be too much lyrics for one song, and then I will like try to get an idea or a line and put it into a different song, and or like try to, and that's how the music ends up. The music is already kind of connected sometimes, because sometimes it's like certain passages musically that will repeat or something. And so that's kind of how these albums end up having themes or seem connected when it's not really as forced as that. It's more just putting lyrics into songs, and they all come from the same time, and so they all have a similar bent or something.
Speaking of themes, I'm just going through some of the songs on the record, and I'm kind of curious on your take, because we talked about the elimination of these like better quality copiers from Kinko's. We've talked a little bit alluding to online discourse, and I think of a song like Boyce or Boice. And I'm kind of curious, do you have an ethos when it comes to technological engagement? I mean, obviously, you're in a band. You're using instruments and electricity, but I'm just wondering overall, is there an approach you take, or do you have certain boundaries for what you allow to be present online, or what you refrain from engaging with online?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Boyce or Boice was just it was actually one of those old websites I found, like under construction website, where it was like, combining technology and religion, where it was like, if your computer's not working, it's because there's a demon in it, and you need to say a prayer, and here's the prayer that you say to get this demon out. Like, I wonder if that page, I haven't looked for it in years, but there was like a website, like, here's the prayers you need to say to keep your computers working good. So that was the inspiration for that. But early on, as a band, we were like, we're not very charismatic guys. and a lot of like being in a band is selling yourself and advertising yourself. And it was definitely, when we started in 2010, it was all about being on Facebook and, really being online a lot. And that was one thing we all kind of agreed on. We kind of had a distaste for it. But, when we started, we were just, like, if I'm going to make a post about a show that we're playing at a bar in Detroit, I know that I'm just reaching my friends online, like letting them know, hey, we're playing this show. So we do that. Like, you didn't really have to think about what your online image is in the early days, because we were just talking amongst our friends, basically. But then as we got a little bit bigger, like definitely by this point, it was like, we don't want to have a Instagram page. We don't want to have, like, as new sort of social media platforms popped up, we're like, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be one of these bands that's like, hey, today, like, we don't want to engage with people like they're fans necessarily. I don't know how to explain it, but this seemed like the medium is a message, right? We didn't like being part of, but we knew that we had to be like on Facebook back then, and eventually, before the last record, we're like, let's get an Instagram page, because our label wants us to have an Instagram page, but we're going to make sure that it's very dry, and it's just like, here's the poster of an event coming up, or like, we're not going to have any personality on it. And that's because it's a drag to do. We didn't want to become a band where it was all like the cult of personality and the music was second. It helps that we're ugly and old, because I don't think we have that juice that would have, how like when music videos came out, all the ugly bands kind of disappeared because the good-looking bands got bigger. It's kind of felt like that a little bit, where it's like, we don't want to be a part of this. And also, you don't want to put your life, you don't want like parasocial type things developing. And I had an Instagram page that was not private, and then somebody wrote an article about the band, and then posted pictures of like, Joe's mom died, and here's a picture of his mom, and like, they got it off my Instagram page. And I was like, I don't like that. I don't like this feeling, so I need to stop doing that. So there's always nothing was set in stone, except for we don't like being online too much, because that's probably another reason why we're not as big as maybe we think we should be, or we're as big, But I think it was good for our mental health and good for us that I do think avoiding that has been to a benefit. Now, we didn't do it as much as like Parquet Courts didn't even have they had like an old website. They never were online for anything, and we weren't as hardcore as they were. So
yeah, it's just the one website, right? I don't know. Do they have? Yeah. I don't think they have other.
No, they have like parkrecords.com or whatever, or .net or .org. I give them credit, but yeah.
Yeah, and Joe, I just want to go back to something you said, because I think you've alluded to something where no matter what label you're on, there is a tendency for the label heads, they want bands to promote themselves, and in this day and age, it's going to be you get an Instagram page, or you develop a TikTok so you can share small videos. I think this ends to a bigger conversation about how much unpaid labor goes into being in a band, even just in terms of promotion, because it's just not you play a gig, you get your stipend for performing, you get a few free beers at the bar.
Right.
No, you're performing labor all the time, even with promotion. How do you deal with that kind of, it is, I would imagine, constant work that you're performing just being in the group?
Yeah, I mean, and it's good that, I do feel like when you're dealing with a label like Domino and they're like giving you these suggestions, like it was never a thing like, okay, now you guys have to do like some personal stories. We need more Instagram stories or things like that. You mostly get those. You get that a lot from local promoters for shows. Sometimes they'll be like, this show's not selling well enough. Like, if you would do a video where you beg people to buy tickets, then maybe that will help. And it's like, of course that would help, but you have to think about, do I want to have a video of me begging people to buy tickets to the show? No, I don't. So but yes, the amount of time, touring is this amazing thing where you get to go around the world and you get to go to these places that you'll never go to, but then you also never see the beautiful part of the city. You're always going to go to the place, especially in like a place like Paris. You're going to go to the part of Paris where you're allowed to be loud, because they have very strict sound level laws there. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be like in the industrial wasteland part of Paris, and you're going to come in at 2 in the afternoon. You're going to stay there in that wasteland, and then you're going to leave to go to the next show. So the act of touring is you're working pretty much a 24-hour day for very little money, and then on top of that, then maybe you need to do these meet and greets or whatever. And we've never done. We've done one record store signing very early on in our career, and nobody showed up, and we said, let's never do this again. that sort of thing is just not our style. And so it's great to be that reticent and say, but then you have to also deal with the fact that, like, you're not going to be, you're not going to have that connection with your fan base on that level, and so you have to expect not every ticket for a show is going to sell out, or you constantly feel like maybe I should put in more effort, and then things will be different. But then you kind of have to think about why you decided not to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, this is just random thought. Whenever they introduced, I don't remember exactly, when they introduced the like on posts, I'm like, oh no.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like people are checking, did it get likes? It's just a whole nother thing.
Right. And I like, it is a reality, and you can see it from like the way like some festivals are curated and things, is that a lot of, and it always, we've been a band long enough so we see how it changes, where you can see that like, how do you register success in we'll say the music business now? And I don't know. It maybe used to be amount of Instagram followers. Now it's probably TikTok followers, or like the fact that Spotify becomes like the general way that they rate if somebody is successful or not. Whereas like nobody knows how to rate how somebody is successful like in a clear way, And so that changes. Like TikTok wasn't around when we started, or it wasn't a big thing, and then it became this big behemoth of like, some bands are big on TikTok, some bands are big on YouTube. There's no way you can cover all those bases
I don't think
without going insane.
I don't think anyone really knows. They're just like, here's a new thing. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do the new thing. I don't want to do the new thing.
It's like grasping for vapor. It's always going to elude you, so it doesn't really matter how hard you try.
Yes.
Joe, I know we've been talking for a bit. I just have a few more questions, Joe, just about some songs from the record, and then we just have a few more questions to ask after that. There's just 2 songs specifically we want to ask about. I finally said it specifically. So one of them, Pontiac 87. I will say, on a personal level, this song really resonated for me because there were relatives of mine that spoke about the visit of the Pope to the Silver Dome, and it was kind of talked about in this hushed reverie. And I had always been a bit cynical about this visitation and about different aspects of Catholicism, but this track really resonated with me with not only its themes about this corruption of the sacred through exchanging money, but also just general disillusionment and disappointment. I'm wondering if you can talk about the origin of the song for yourself, and maybe if there's anything that you intended in the song that maybe people aren't hearing when people talk to you about it.
Yeah, well, it's one of those. It did happen to me. It was big. It was '87 when the Pope came to Detroit, and it was a big deal. And because he was a Polish Pope, he was going to go to Hamtramck, and they got the statue down there of him on the diving board, Hamtramck in Detroit. We went to the Silver Dome, and I definitely was excited. And it was just kind of my experience of going through it. And my older brother, Jim, had like a little bit of a freak out when we were leaving, and basically a riot broke out of people pushing and shoving, trying to get to the parking lot. And maybe this was a common thing, but for me, like I had been to baseball games and things, so it was like kind of shocking to see like all these people in their Sunday best pushing to get their way out. And I remember specifically when we got out to the parking lot, and you still have to go, it was a sold out thing, so you got to walk. It felt like miles to get to, and people were trying to get on buses and things, and there's old ladies falling over, and it was really scary. Mm-hmm. And George H.W., the vice president at the time, was at the Silver Dome for the Mass, and so Air Force Two, the helicopter, is taking off like over this crowd of people pushing and shoving, and it just felt like, later on I was like, wow, it felt like, the fall of Vietnam, and the helicopters are taking off. Like it felt like a war zone, it was really quite something. And then, but that's just the first verse, and the second verse is kind of like going to Jumbo's, the bar that we played at a lot, and then thinking about Detroit. It's about like illusions falling from your eyes, basically, or like when you were young, you thought, you think some way, and then your illusion is crushed a little bit by reality, and it can be a devastating thing, or it can be like, well, thank God I no longer live under this delusion. And so like the Jumbo's part is like around that time, Detroit was starting to get gentrified, and it was kind of a double-edged sword where it's very nice that fancy restaurants are coming back to Detroit and that people can walk the streets, but then there's also the fact that a lot of it was coming from the outside, and it was making Detroit expensive for people that have lived there for a long time, and it wasn't, it was a lot of money, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but like it's 10 years later, and it's definitely a different city than it was back then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's part of it. It's like, seeing. I remember the Mass being very wonderful as a 10-year-old kid. Like, I'm at the Silver Dome. This is great. But then having that illusion of like piety and everyone being like, you think they just got out of Mass, everyone would be peaceful. No, they're right back to being terrible, terrible people. But that is kind of a religious experience, in a corny way. It's what I wanted. I wanted to be my illusions. It can be a good thing to have your illusions crushed and to have reality slap you in the face, because then you can deal with it. And so that's and there ain't no use to cry. Like the repeated thing at the end is just it's people really lock on to that. I didn't expect them when I first started doing that song. I'd do the repeated thing very dry and very like deadpan, mm-hmm. and as deadpan as possible, because that's kind of what I was going for, where it's just like the constant things that make you want to cry, like, well, there's no point in it. Very sarcastic, but now people really get into that, and so when I'm doing it live, it does almost become a weird anthem in a way that was never intended, but I do kind of like the way the meaning of the song maybe changes over time and for different people, because it's a vague enough song where it's not super specific, but it's not like I don't know what I'm singing half the time.
No, I think it's definitely a fan favorite. I know a lot of people like this track, and we were talking a little bit about the music, but I was curious about this one because like the song has definitely an ebb and flow to it when it picks up for the fall from grace part. Was that there always, or like did that kind of change a little bit when the words started coming into it?
For the most part, except for minor changes, because Greg is the guitar player, and he usually is like kind of the band leader as far as the music goes. Him and Alex, the drummer, really kind of worked together like to figure stuff out. And back then we were a little bit, because we were younger and we had these bad jobs where we could practice all the time. They would work on stuff in the practice area, the practice space, and I'd come in and I'd listen to a lot, and then I'd kind of like sing along to things. They would work on things, and then I would come in, and I'm sure there was a discussion at some point, like how long do we want the end part to be, But they kind of, it's always been a thing where they kind of come up with stuff that they're happy with, and then I try to figure out if I can be happy with it, and what's going to be, and that makes it exciting because I don't know what a verse is, I don't know what a chorus is, I don't know what a pre-chorus is, I don't know what a bridge is. So for me, it's all like, what does it seem like I should be doing here? And then that becomes the song. And that one is pretty easy. It's like, verse, chorus. They wanted to do sort of I think it sort of started maybe as a waltz or something. I don't know. Greg always is trying to do something different. I don't know what he was trying to do with that one, but that one was pretty easy to write. And, yeah.
Oh, that's intriguing. We've been talking so much about the past, and, definitely we're looking at Agent Intellect, which is celebrating 10 years as of this year. But let's also look at what's happening in the present, because coinciding with this, you've released a live album of songs from around this time period. It's titled Pin Eyes Under the Elder. But it's a vinyl release, correct? Yes.
Yeah, and that was just because, unfortunately for us, and, this is one aspect, instead of, we didn't go online a lot, but we should have recorded a lot more shows. We don't really have a lot of recordings of our live shows, and now that we're getting to be an old band, it's kind of like, I'd like to hear what we sounded like 10 years ago or whatever. And so it's from around that period when the album came out, and it was just a way, we like doing, Greg doesn't really like live records too much. In the band, we're about 50-50. I like them, but we like the idea of these they're almost like bootlegs, in that we just kind of put them out ourselves, and it's a limited amount, and it's only on record ever, and so that way it's like for people that want them, they're there, but it's not like an official. Yeah, and because we knew that this year we weren't going to be putting anything out because we're busy with other things, but we wanted to put something out, so that was the live record.
And because it's vinyl only, I don't imagine there's any intent to put it to streaming. Is that intentional, or am I speaking out of turn? Is there a plan to put that online at any point?
Oh no, that's intentional.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to, before we had because we put this out pretty much ourselves. Domino gives us the blessing, and we just we go to third man pressing, and we pay to make this record basically, and just to cover costs, and it's just a way to kind of put out these little collector items or little bootleg sort of things. I like the idea of when there's official releases, and then there's these things, and we don't want it to be clogging up our streaming thing. If we were a famous enough band to get away from streaming, I would do it in a heartbeat, but we're not. I like the idea of the physical object, and so this is just one of those things.
Yeah, we also just wanted to ask briefly about you had Formal Growth in the Desert in 2023, and then 2024 you did put out a single. What's on the what's going on future plans?
Well, I can say that we have recorded this year, and we still have to do some mixing. And if all goes well, there should be something out new next year. Probably not until the late summer or fall if we get it right. Things just take longer now than they used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited about next year, and what we've recorded sounds pretty interesting. I think. I don't know if we're going to get any. I don't know if we're going to get any new fans, or if we're going to lose some fans. I don't know. I think right now we're in the weird period where it's recorded but not mixed, and for me this is always the worst period for my mental state, because it's recorded and done, but it doesn't sound good or it doesn't sound complete.
Okay.
And so there's always that second guessing where you're like, what have we done? These all sound terrible. And I've done that many times before in previous records. So there's always that kind of, like, right after you do a lot of work, you're like, oh, no. But I do feel pretty confident that once they get mixed, it's going to be pretty exciting.
Cool. Well, Joe, thanks for talking with us. I just had one more thing to ask, if that's cool.
Sure.
Since myself just growing up in Windsor, I have family in Detroit. I've always gone back and forth, always, just my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering about the Windsor-Detroit connection in your experience, just kind of growing up in this area.
Well, my grandmother and grandfather, they were both from Canada. They were born in Lambton.
Oh.
And so we would go over there quite a bit and, had relatives buried on that side. So when Grandma was alive, we'd go over there and quite a bit. And I always, it's kind of like being in a border town. I mean, it is like being on a border town, but it does feel kind of that excitement. And, it was always like growing up, Canadian radio is basically where it was at. Like, that's where you would first hear alternative music, and then later on the one oldie station, I have a song about 580 memories. That was and just of course back before 9/11, when you wanted to go get a beer, you go across the border to I get to go to a bar. So like the first time I went to a bar in Windsor, lots of good Windsor memories. And I remember like going over there, like that's where if you had like a date, you'd take a girl over to Windsor. That would be because the restaurants were over there was better or something. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting. And then you also have, I've always just wanted to ask about, because everyone always asked about the Windsor hum. It's a song on Relative and Descent, right?
Yes.
But I think it's gone now. Is the Windsor hum gone now?
I believe it's been, because Zug Island shut down.
Yeah.
And then it just stopped. So it was like all this great mystery. Could it be the big factory across the water that is pounding? I don't know what they were pounding, but they were pounding something, and then it stopped, and then it went away. So that mystery.
That was a thing that was talked about forever.
I will say that song, as a Windsorite, Joe, that's a bit of affirmation. It was something that we finally got recognized for. Maybe not a pleasant thing, but, hearing that in a song that got some traction was quite a nice thing to hear.
Yes.
It's kind of feeling like, you're part of a secret club and you have this joke that no one else gets, and finally someone else tells the joke and you're like, oh, someone gets it.
Yes.
So just on a pure anecdotal level, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. And I'm excited now that the Howe Bridge is going to be, I guess it got pushed back. But once that thing opens, who knows what the Detroit to Windsor relations are going to be. Now we'll get another bridge going. So.
Yeah, exactly. It would be nice to bridge some of these divides, both metaphoric and literal, that we have. But, with that said, though, Joe, genuinely, we appreciate this chance to have been able to speak with you. Just before we go, is there anything else you want to share about Proto-Martyr or about anything coming up?
We're just doing a very, very short little tour where we're going to be playing Detroit. I don't know when this is coming out, but it probably will be after we've done it because it's next week. And then we just, next year, hopefully there'll be a new record. And, there's a live record that you can still get online. I believe there's still, because there was a delay in the printing, so I think it'll be ready this week.
Mm-hmm.
Going to go out this week or next, just in time for Christmas. And then, we'll hopefully be touring some more. I know we're playing Montreal in February. That seems like a terrible time to go to Montreal in the winter. But we're playing there. That's our one Canadian show for now. I don't think we're going to be doing it. There's not going to be a tour around that.
Okay.
But and we've got friends in Windsor. Like, we're still maybe this next record we will finally play Windsor for the first time.
Honestly, that would be. I think that would be amazing. But we're biased.
With some sort of record release thingy where it's like we play one in Windsor and one over because
Cool. Thanks, Joe. I don't know if Adam's able to make it, but I'm definitely going to be at the show coming up. It's on the 16th. Right?
Yes.
It's always a good time at the show. And thanks again, Joe, and we'll talk
if you see me, say hello.
All right. We will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice talking to you guys.
So you've been listening to Interzone, a podcast here that we do not really frequently, but infrequently. And I've been one of your hosts, Dave, and I've been joined with my co-host, Adam.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I realized in our introduction we never actually introduced ourselves, but you guys know who
Yeah, we did.
are. Sure, close enough.
Did we?
I don't remember. It was an hour ago, but another big thank you to Joe and to Protomartyr for making fantastic music. The Agent Intellect is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Definitely check out that record if you haven't had a chance to yet. Formal Growth in the Desert is Protomartyr's last record, released back in 2023. With that said, also, if you happen to see Protomartyr go on tour, check them out. And tune in next time. You don't tune in, it's a podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. Did we do that? Jam that jam? Do we do that now?
No. You can find us on a lot of places, and you can become a follower.
We got podcasts, including we got a Substack.
You can find all the info about this and a little mini post about this episode on our Substack, interzonepod.substack.com. And then you can find the podcast in most places where podcasts are available. You can find a link to all the places it is available if you just go to that website.
That's right. So that's it for this edition. Tune in next time where Dave is going to drink 7 successive bottles of Faygo and we pour Mentos down his throat. That will be an exciting episode.
Minty fresh.
Minty fresh. But seriously, thank you for listening. This is Adam and Dave, and you've been listening to Interzone.